I inherited everything from my ex-husband's mother after taking care of her. Now he and his mistress are threatening legal action. Hi guys, I'm in a bind and would like to hear everyone's opinion. My name is Yigi. I'm 27 years old and I have a 7-year-old daughter named Naomi. I was married to my ex-husband, Jack 30, for almost 8 years. When I was 2 months pregnant with our second child, I discovered that my ex-husband was cheating on me with his coworker, Susan 28, when I accidentally found text messages on his phone. When I confronted him crying, Jack finally told me that Susan was also pregnant with his child. Hearing his words, I was so shocked that I almost fainted. My husband and I had several fights, and even though my ex-mother-in-law came to take care of me during that time, I was so stressed that I finally had a miscarriage. When my ex found out that we had lost the baby, he didn't even hesitate. Instead of commending me, he left the house to be with Susan, blaming me for the loss. Our son was devastated, and I cried for days. Thankfully, my mother-in-law stayed with me the whole time and took care of my daughter Naomi so I could grieve in peace. We had a nasty divorce where he refused to pay child support, but eventually the court forced him to. Throughout the divorce, Jack made it very clear that he didn't want to be involved in Naomi's life or mine. He gave up full custody in my favor, which completely broke my heart for my daughter, but there was nothing I could do. All he's done is pay child support every month. I've never tried to visit Naomi or meet her. Finally, I found out that Susan gave birth to their son, and they've been together ever since. Throughout all of this, my parents and my ex-mother-in-law were there for me every day. You see, my ex-mother-in-law and my parents knew each other and were best friends. They'd known each other for a long time. That's how Jack and I met through our parents. We eventually started dating when Jack's mother, my ex-mother-in-law, first found out about us. That Jack had cheated on me was extremely upset with him, and she showed her support for me. She and Jack fought a lot about his affair, and she swore never to speak to him again when she found out he was leaving me. She also warned him that she wanted nothing to do with his affair partner and their child. I know it's shocking, but my ex-mother-in-law kept that promise until the day she died. She refused to speak to Jack even when he begged her to visit him and his child with his affair partner. Susan was extremely jealous of me and my daughter because she was never considered family by my ex-mother-in-law. When my ex-mother-in-law first came to support me, she faced a lot of criticism from her family. You see, she had lost her father a few years earlier, so her relatives tried to convince my ex-mother-in-law to forgive him. They told her that Jack was her son, so she should put the past behind her and visit her child. My ex-mother-in-law firmly refused. When Susan gave birth to Jack's child, her relatives gathered around her despite knowing that he had cheated on me. They didn't even bother to worry or ask about her, my daughter and I. The relationship between my ex-mother-in-law and her family became so bad that they started excluding my ex-mother-in-law from their celebrations and family events just so they could invite Jack. My ex-mother-in-law always refused to attend events, and Jack would be with his partner from Aventura. I always felt sorry for her, but she assured me that I was like a daughter to her, and she didn't care if her family excluded her. I am extremely grateful to have had a woman like her as my ex-mother-in-law because it is rare to be so loved and supported. Unfortunately, my ex-mother-in-law became ill, losing the ability to walk and care for herself. I extended an invitation for her to move in with me, permanently committing to care for her and ensure she had 24-hour support. We hired a nanny who lived with us and attended to her needs in the mornings. As for the nights, the responsibility fell on me. I dedicated countless hours to her care. And honestly, I didn't mind. Naomi, always affectionate with her grandmother, was excited to have her living with us during her stay with us in our home. My former mother-in-law revealed something significant. She told me that when she found out, for the first time knowing that Jack was leaving me, he decided to make changes to his will. Initially, he intended for my ex-husband as his only child to inherit everything. However, upon discovering his affair, he amended the will. Now the house and his life insurance were designated for Naomi. He also included me in his will to receive a large portion of his money and family heirlooms. It was a gesture that embodied both honor and trust. His wish was that I protect these possessions by passing them on to Naomi when the time was right. The idea that a piece of her and perhaps generations before her would continue in our family filled me with a deep sense of connection. My ex-husband was to inherit his car and his father's entire art collection until my daughter turned 18. The money would be in my trust. If I passed away, my parents would take care of it. Upon revealing the details, a mixture of emotions washed over me. surprise, gratitude, and a touch of sadness lingered in the air. Knowing that he recognized the difficulties we had faced and wanted to secure Naomi's future was heartwarming. I was filled with gratitude. Let's make sure several times that I could change the will again. If I wanted to include Susan and her son, I emphasized that I would never hold a grudge against her since Susan was now his wife. But my mother-in-law reiterated that she only recognized me as her son's wife, and therefore felt that Naomi was the rightful heir to her home. To carry on the family legacy, I understood where she was coming from and accepted her decision. During her stay with me, Jack never bothered to call and ask about her health. Despite our differences, I wouldn't have had a problem if he had come to see her, but he never bothered to do so. One day, my ex-mother-in-law had difficulty breathing, and I had to rush her to the hospital. I was afraid something would happen to her. While my dad was taking care of Naomi, my mom and I spent the whole night at the hospital praying for her recovery. Fortunately, she did, and we were able to take her home. After this health scare, I didn't want my ex-mother-in-law to die without having made peace. With her putting aside our differences, I called him begging him to visit my ex-mother-in-law. I told him how the doctor had warned us about her condition and feared she wouldn't survive much longer. Instead of worrying about her, Jack started arguing about how his mother had never bothered to form a relationship with Susan. I begged him to put his ego aside for his mother's sake. He argued that he had a busy schedule and couldn't dedicate much time. It was disheartening to see his indifference, especially when faced with his mother's fragile health. Despite his reluctance, I persisted, urging them to reconsider and spend some quality time with her. Reluctantly, she agreed to a brief visit. When Jack finally arrived, I was surprised to see that he had brought Susan with him. Although I wasn't thrilled about her coming to my house for my ex-mother-in-law's sake, I remained silent. When she saw his mother, it was clear that the tense relationship between them persisted. The room was filled with awkward silences broken by forced conversations. Jack's behavior toward her remained the same. Even when he saw her in this fragile state, he spoke in a measured tone, avoiding any meaningful conversation with her. It became clear that his visit was more of a formality than a genuine attempt to repair their fractured relationship. Discouraged by the lack of emotional connection, I found solace in the fact that at least he had fulfilled his commitment to visit. When my ex-mother-in-law noticed that I had come to visit with Susan and her son, she immediately began to protest. I calmed down and asked how my daughter was, who looked sad and hurt to see her father Jack didn't even bother to acknowledge her while I was in the kitchen. I noticed Susan go out to the backyard and talk to someone on the phone through the open window. She laughed as she talked about how she had been forced to come and visit Jack's mother. She spoke about how Jack had told her that his mother was going to leave everything to him, so the least they could do was visit her one last time. She expressed how she couldn't wait to move into the house and change it, since my ex-husband was going to own the property. I was shocked to hear this, and struggled to comprehend how cruel it was. She continued talking about how she was going to change the furniture, paint the walls, and even alter the backyard landscape so that nothing of my ex-mother-in-law would remain. While she enthusiastically shared her vision, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief and anger at her lack of respect for the family history. It was then that I finally understood the truth. Susan's interest in my former mother-in-law wasn't genuine. It became clear that her motives were centered on securing her position in the will. This discovery broke my heart, as it seemed she cared more about the potential inheritance than my former mother-in-law's well-being during her final days. Despite the disturbing truth about Susan's intentions, I kept the knowledge to myself, choosing not to hurt or add an unnecessary burden to my former mother-in-law. Jack had no idea that his mother had changed the will after he cheated on me and divorced me. He believed he would inherit everything with the intention of passing it on to his son with Susan. I chose not to tell him anything, because it wasn't my place. If he didn't even bother to acknowledge our daughter Naomi, then he deserved what was coming. To him, Jack and Susan continued their visit, oblivious to this fact. It was a bittersweet situation for me. On one hand, I would have to lose my dear ex-mother-in-law, but on the other hand, I couldn't wait to finally see the expression on Jack's face when he found out about the updated will. It saddened me, and I dreaded the day I would have to lose my ex-mother-in-law. She always meant so much to me. I knew her quite well, and knew that she had made this decision after careful consideration. She wanted this for her granddaughter, and always said that she wouldn't be able to rest until she knew that her son and Susan had been punished for their actions. She wanted Naomi to feel loved and appreciated, even when she was no longer here, as my ex-mother-in-law's health deteriorated. Jack never visited her again, and none of her relatives came to see her. Unfortunately, she passed away last week. Upon my ex-mother-in-law's death, I took the initiative to organize her funeral, despite the lack of support from relatives. I wanted to ensure that she received a dignified farewell. My parents and I took care of all the arrangements, from selecting a beautiful coffin to arranging a serene place. Susan didn't even bother to attending the funeral with Jack. Although some of her relatives attended, they showed a lack of genuine concern. When her lawyer finally contacted me about her will, emotions overwhelmed me. Tears streamed down my face as I absorbed the news that she had left me everything just as we had discussed. Conflicting waves of joy and sadness engulfed me as I mourned the loss of a loved one, but also felt grateful to finally be able to provide my daughter with everything she had ever wanted. As I navigated this mix of emotions, there was a sudden knock at my door. Opening it, I found Susan, Jack, Darren, and some other relatives standing there with somber expressions. Jack asked if everyone could come in, and I readily agreed. The atmosphere was tense as they entered, and Jack wasted no time demanding an explanation for the will. His accusatory tone echoed in the resentful room. "Why did you get everything? My mother had a house, money, heirlooms, and you end up with it all," he exclaimed with palpable anger. I tried to maintain my composure by explaining that my former mother-in-law had carefully considered her decision and had made this choice. She began accusing me of manipulating her mother and influencing her decision when she was bedridden, but reiterated that I could verify the timestamp and date of her updated will, which was made long before her health began to decline. Susan intervened, her voice tinged with resentment, questioning why my daughter and I deserved to have everything when she and her son were also family. In response, I belittled her while we were on the phone. Her eyes widened as she realized I remembered word for word what she had said about Jack's mother. Jack looked at her, surprised to realize Susan's true intentions. Susan was taken aback and tried to deny my claims, accusing me of making things up to divide the family. She emphatically stated that she had been unfaithful to Jack while he was still married to me. Therefore, she and Jack were the ones who actually divided the family in the first place. The argument escalated, with Jack's relatives joining in and expressing their disappointment at receiving nothing from my ex-mother-in-law. They pointed out that, being blood relatives of my ex-mother-in-law, they deserved to have a share of his inheritance. They all started insisting that I sell her property and divide the money into 8 parts. I was surprised by their callousness and arrogance in demanding something they had no right to. I emphatically told them that I was the only one who had cared for her until her last days, while none of them bothered to visit her. Therefore, they had no right to barge into my house and demand something that belonged to my former mother-in-law. The room echoed with raised voices as they continued to question the fairness of the will. Jack protested, claiming it was his childhood home and that he deserved to live there with Susan and their son. He threatened to sue me and contest the will if I didn't give him the house. I laughed in his face. Hearing his words, Jack seemed surprised by my reaction, as I reminded him that he had been a negligent son to his mother and never bothered to check on her. I reminded him that he only came to see her when I begged him to. I told him once that he was welcome to try to sue me and spend his money that the lawyer had already. I was informed that the will was unbreakable and that there was nothing I could do. Naomi was his granddaughter, and I was his daughter-in-law who loved and cared for her. So with good reason, he left us everything. Then when Susan began to beg and plead with me to stop being so selfish and to consider her son Darren, she kept emphasizing how Darren deserved to have a good life like Naomi. I agreed with that sentiment, but I questioned whether he never cared to think about my daughter Naomi and how my ex-husband had cared for her all these years. Naomi was also his daughter, but he chose not to be a part of her life. I made it clear to Susan that she could beg all she wanted, but I was never going to give anything to her or her son. I politely but firmly asked everyone to leave my house and leave me alone. I reminded them that they could review the contents of his will with their lawyer again if they wished, but I was already done with this discussion. I knew they couldn't do anything, otherwise they wouldn't have come to me in anger and with demands. I closed the door in their faces, feeling satisfied that I stood my ground and respected my ex-mother-in-law's wishes. I have since continued to receive calls and messages from Jack. He continues to passionately express his contempt for me, insisting that if I had any shred of decency, I would hand over everything that he claims rightfully belongs to his family, and not to me and Naomi. So I am wrong for not giving in to the demands of my ex-husband and his family. Update. I thought this post would only attract a few people. But wow, thank you all for listening and giving me your suggestions and advice. As for those who are angry with me for not asking my mother-in-law to include my ex's new child, Susan, I tried. But this was entirely her decision. For now, I can't do anything about it. You can call me selfish, but I refuse to give up any part of the inheritance. I am going to put myself and my daughter first. I resent Jack and Susan because they broke my heart, and their affair contributed to my miscarriage while I was devastated. Jack added to my pain, and heartbreaking to be left for her. My ex-mother-in-law made the conscious decision not to include the son and Susan in her will. She had more than enough. Time to update the will if she had wanted to, but she didn't. I feel sorry for the son, but it's not my responsibility. For a clearer understanding, based on what I know, my ex-mother-in-law had her entire childhood ruined because her father made his aventuras. Children his top priority, I suppose. That's why she didn't want anything to do with Jack. Jack obviously knew all this, but still chose to do this to her. Despite this, my ex-mother-in-law left Jack his entire art collection, which will provide him with thousands of dollars. So he can definitely take pretty good care of his son and his son. The people criticizing me in the comments wouldn't be half as civilized as I am if something like this happened to them. Therefore, I'm not going to give in to Jack's demands at all. Naomi is also Jack's daughter, but he only cares about his son. He never cared about being a good father to Naomi, so he doesn't deserve to get anything from us after everything she's put us through all these years. Update 2. The tension with Jackie Susan has continued to be prominent. Her relentless demands and accusations have affected my peace of mind. Yesterday, Susan called me out of the blue. I didn't even have her number saved. So I answered the call without knowing who it was. Her tone was hostile from the start. She began accusing me of being a greedy gold digger, claiming I stole everything that should have been theirs. She told me she was glad Jack had left me after the miscarriage because I didn't deserve to be his wife. I was in the middle of work, so I was quite surprised by her aggressive tone. I calmly explained that my ex-mother-in-law made the decision and that I didn't orchestrate anything. However, Susan wouldn't accept any of that. She continued insulting me, questioning my integrity. I firmly reminded her that she never had a relationship with my ex-mother-in-law when she was alive, so it was absurd for her to demand something that belonged to her. Susan started threatening me and my daughter, saying that if I didn't give Jack a share of my inheritance, she would find a way to contact my daughter and tell her the truth about me. This crossed a line for me. I immediately told her that involving my daughter was unacceptable, and that if she even went near her, I would have her arrested. I already had evidence of her multiple text messages annoying me, and getting a restraining order wouldn't take long. I also reminded her that I could play that game too by contacting her boss and showing them evidence of how she was threatening me. This seemed to shut her up. I hung up and immediately called Jack. I informed him about what his wife had told me and reiterated the same thing about involving the police. If this continued, expressing surprise that Susan had threatened Naomi. He began to apologize on her behalf, but I interrupted him. I firmly told him that he didn't owe her anything, that I was going to take what her mother left me. She can cry all she wants, but it belongs to me, and she can't do anything about it. I warned her that the next time she contacts me, or if her wife contacts my daughter, she will face serious legal consequences. Since then, surprisingly, my phone has been silent. I plan to keep my words if Susan or Jack dare to contact me again. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I've continued to receive hundreds of requests to share more of my story. So here it goes. We've moved into my ex-mother-in-law's house. As we've settled into her home, I can help. But we're still here. I miss her everywhere, in the rooms where we laughed, in the backyard where she enjoyed her afternoons, and in the kitchen where we shared countless conversations. Her presence lingers in every corner of the house that once resonated. With her warmth every day, I pass through a mix of emotions. Gratitude for the legacy that safeguards Naomi's future, and a sense of loss due to the absence of the woman who meant so much to us. I try to find comfort, knowing that the house, once a sanctuary for my former mother-in-law, will continue to be a refuge for Naomi. In these moments, I carry her spirit with me, grateful for the time we had together and determined to honor the legacy she left behind.